The spring 2023 eclipse season starts with the total solar eclipse in Ashwini Nakshatra on the 20th of April. For eclipse season, I am putting forward a special offer for you to understand how the eclipses will impact your personal horoscope. And if you're interested in scheduling in one of these consultations at a special offer, you can do that at the link above. So, geek warning. Okay. So I'm going to put a timestamp down in the comments section of this video. For those of you who just want to jump to the part in the video that speaks about, what the eclipse is all about. But just for people who, are a little bit of the astrology geek types, I'm going to include a little bit at the beginning to explain exactly what eclipses are. So we have eclipses whenever you have a new moon or a full moon in close proximity to one of the nodes. Okay, the nodes being Rahu and Ketu in Vedic astrology. For those of you who understand Western astrology more, that's the north and the south nodes. So when a new moon happens in close proximity to one of the nodes, that is when we have a solar eclipse. And when a full moon happens in close proximity to one of the nodes, that is when we have a lunar eclipse. So that's the astronomical explanation of it. But let's get to a metaphysical understanding of what's actually happening, especially at a solar eclipse, so that you understand. The sun in astrology represents what is known as the Atman, or the soul. Atman means the soul of everything, right? So the sun represents the individual soul in this particular instance. The moon is our manas, or our sensory mind, our consciousness. So when we have a new moon in close proximity to one of the nodes, what is actually happening with an eclipse is that the moon is casting its shadow on the sun, which simply put means the way we are picking up on something subjectively interferes with our capacity to connect on a deeper level with our soul. So it's a really profound thing that's happening at those times. And I want for you to keep that in consideration as we go into the explanation of what this particular solar eclipse is all about. So what I want you to do before we get started is I want you to just kind of, let your mind go as quiet as your mind can go, okay? Especially if you're driving. You don't want to close your eyes if you're driving. I don't recommend anything like that. But, just let yourself kind of tune in to what I'm going to say here, okay? In an ideal world, what would you like to, at this particular moment in your life, create going forward? What's the ideal version of what you would like to create going forward? Let that be there in your mind for long enough to create an imprint on your mind. And then what I want you to do is, I just want you to forget about it. Okay? I want you to forget about it for now. Because sometimes when we focus too firmly on the ideal, we become obsessed with the ideal. We become unwilling to adapt our vision. We begin to see that the only way for us to get from point A to point B is in one particular, very self-determined type of way. And usually when that happens, we find ourselves in a position of creating more problems for ourselves, especially when something that we're striving to achieve, which is likely the case as we approach this particular eclipse, when something that we're trying to achieve involves working with other people. Because we're not all the same people. We all have a different version. Everybody has a different quote unquote ideal of what that ideal world looks like going forward. Sure, we may have some commonality of ideas, but quite often we'll find that we have a different version of how we're going to get from point A to point B. And along the way, if we're not willing to, make a sacrifice for the sake of something that we share in common with other people that we're trying to achieve our goal with, then we're going to find ourselves in a position where we're obstructing what it is that we're actually trying to achieve. Now, there's a deeper layer of what is going on with this particular eclipse, which I'm going to explain, briefly, right? Which is when planets are in close proximity to the sun, they get a little bit agitated in terms of what their purpose is. Equally, when planets are combust, like especially Jupiter, as we approach this particular eclipse, there is a disruption of the energy of that planet. Okay. And when Jupiter is combust, quite often it makes us feel like one part of us is unworthy of what we're trying to achieve. So if you have a goal in mind and you're overly determined to achieve it in a specific way, and it doesn't turn out in quite the way that you want it to, you're likely, as we approach this particular eclipse season, going to see yourself as somehow not worthy of attaining the vision that you're striving to attain. You're likely going to find yourself obsessing about, like, how can I make this happen? How can I force this to happen? Well, in actuality, you can't force it. Which is why I started off this particular video trying to get you to focus on the ideal of what you want to create, but to then just let it go. Just let it make an imprint of what that vision is, and then let it go, because some adaptation is going to be necessary along the way. And quite often with new moon periods, which is when the moon is actually becoming combust in that particular instance, and the moon is agitated by the sun, which is an astrological concept, then what happens to the moon is it becomes unwilling to adapt. And so what happens is you find yourself in a position where you're trying to go forward, but at the same time, you're somewhat stuck. You're not seeing the bigger picture in this situation. You're dealing with something where the goal that you're wishing to attain, especially in conjunction with other people at this particular moment, is very much attainable. But you need to be in a position where you're not obstructing the greater vision. Okay? So you may find as you approach this particular period of time that you're interacting with other people that are sharing a common goal with you. And you're going to find that there are differences of opinion. And then if you get into that space of going, no, it's my way or the highway, in the back of your mind, you're going to find yourself on a certain level doubting your way. You're going to find yourself in a position where you're of two minds about even achieving the outcome that you were originally striving for. And so then it runs a real risk of not being able to attain whatever it is that you're setting out to attain, which is, of course, dependent upon where this eclipse is, what this eclipse is setting off in your horoscope. So you need to kind of let yourself be in a position where you're sacrificing your particular overly determined way of achieving something for the sake of the greater good. Sometimes ideas can be taken from person B or person C, dependent upon how many people are involved in this. And it can create a conglomeration of a much better idea than one person is going to be able to come up with individually. One particular potential downfall in this particular situation is that the way that you may be, or I should say the goal that you might be striving for, might have something at this particular moment in time to do with your own independence. Okay? And so you see it, especially as you're determined to establish this level of independence that you very much want in your life, you see it as a thing of having to be focused on it in a specific way. But in actuality, you're likely going to get to the destination that you're trying to achieve if rather than being of two minds about how to get there, or rather than being in conflict with another person about how to get there, if instead you surrender the way that you see it, at least to a degree, to the will of all the other parties involved. Remember, you can only be responsible for your part in this. You're not going to be able to make other people do the same thing. And that's one thing to understand. Not everybody is watching this video, unless, of course, you go tell them to. And you can do that, and I'm willing for you to do that. And you can also have them leave lots of comments down below, and you can also have them hit the subscribe button. And hey, I wouldn't complain about any of that. But in the instance that you don't do that, please just recognize that you may not be able to get other people to see things in precisely the way that you do. Sure, you want your independence. Sure, you want things to kind of shift from the present dynamic that they're in. But in order for that to happen, there's going to be some necessary sacrifice that has to be made along the way. A potential for a great level of healing is available to you in one area of your life or another at this particular moment in time. But you have to not be so hard-minded and so forceful about the specifics of how it comes together. You're going to get there perhaps in a roundabout way. But if you let yourself get involved in the petty disputes that go on over how this is going to happen, you're going to find yourself vacillating in your mind in terms of whether you want to be involved with this, the particular steps that need to be taken, whether you have a good idea or a good plan, and the goal that you have at this particular moment is righteous. Remember, cement that vision in your mind initially, then let it go for the sake of the greater good. Stay focused on how you can join together with whoever else is involved in order to create a better way forward that is in alignment with your vision and equally gives to the vision of the other parties involved. And if you could use a little bit of help with this particular eclipse process, once again, as I mentioned, I am offering a very special offer for eclipse season, and you can schedule a consultation to find out what the solar and the lunar eclipse, which will happen 2 weeks after the 20th of April. If you want to know what those are both about for you and how they change your life for the next 6 months, all you have to do is visit the link above and schedule in. That's going to do it for this look at the total solar eclipse in Ashwini Nakshatra, which takes place on the 20th of April, 2023. Until next time, please do take the very best care of yourself. Bye now.